Welcome back to the Nature Cures podcast, where we uncover all those secrets of natural healing and holistic wellness, living your healthiest life.
Yeah, naturally.
Naturally, exactly. Today,
That's what we like.
we are diving deep, into natural approaches to understanding and managing asthma. And we've got some really fascinating material to explore on this. And it looks at asthma through a completely different lens than conventional medicine.
It really does, yeah. It's a perspective that blends that ancient wisdom with modern insights. Recognizing that asthma isn't just this modern ailment.
Yeah.
It's something that people have been dealing with for centuries, and there's a lot we can learn from traditional healing practices.
And speaking of ancient wisdom, I was so struck by how this approach defines asthma.
Yeah.
It goes all the way back to the Greek origin of the word, which literally means panting or short-drawn breath.
So true.
It really captures that feeling of struggling to breathe, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And what's so interesting is that it emphasizes the difficulty of exhaling during an attack. Oh.
You feel trapped, like you can't fully get the air out.
Oh, wow.
That's because the airways, those bronchial tubes, are constricted and filled with mucus.
So it's not just about getting air in.
Right.
It's about that feeling of being unable to fully breathe out. I can see how that would be terrifying.
Yeah.
The material also mentions how these symptoms often worsen at night, which makes sense if you think about lying down and how that might affect your breathing, and it points out that asthma can develop in different ways. Sometimes suddenly, maybe with a coughing fit, or gradually, perhaps after an infection.
Right, and the severe attack can be really intense, with rapid heartbeat, fatigue, chest tightness, sweating, in some cases even vomiting and abdominal pain.
Wow.
It's not something to take lightly.
Yeah.
The material even mentions that foggy weather can make symptoms worse, which I found intriguing.
It makes you wonder about the connection between the environment and our bodies, right? Okay, so let's get into the causes of asthma.
Okay.
The material takes a really multifaceted approach here, going beyond the usual suspects. Exactly. While allergies are definitely a major trigger,
Right.
the body's reaction to things like dust, pollen, animal hairs, it goes deeper than that.
Right, it even lists specific food allergens,
Mm-hmm.
things like wheat, eggs, milk, chocolate, beans, potatoes, pork, and beef.
Oh, gosh.
That's quite a list.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about how what we eat can impact our respiratory health.
Absolutely. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The materials suggest that asthma can also stem from imbalances within the body, not just reactions to external things.
So it's not just about what you're exposed to.
Yes.
It's also about your internal state. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, it talks about the possibility of abnormal body chemistry being a factor.
Okay.
Issues with enzymes, for example, or problems with how the muscles in the lungs function. And it emphasizes that these internal factors can interact with those external triggers like allergies to actually bring on asthma.
So it's a complex interplay of internal and external factors. This material also highlights the role of genetics. It mentions that if both your parents have asthma or hay fever, there's a 75 to 100% chance that you'll have allergic reactions. That's a pretty significant statistic.
It is, and that brings us to another point that really stood out to me.
Okay.
This approach is quite critical of modern medicine's approach to asthma.
Oh.
It argues that the focus on drugs and vaccines, while they might provide temporary relief, isn't actually getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah, it seems like the material sees those treatments as primarily addressing symptoms rather than curing the condition. It even suggests that relying on drugs long-term might make asthma chronic because your body becomes dependent on them.
That's a pretty thought-provoking idea, isn't it? The material ties this back to the concept of allergies as a sign of weakened resistance and internal disharmony, often caused by lifestyle choices.
So it's almost like our modern lifestyles are making us more susceptible to asthma. It's a bit unsettling to think about, but it makes sense if you consider the rise of processed foods, environmental toxins, and chronic stress in our lives.
Exactly, and that's why this approach advocates for a return to nature as the true path to healing.
Okay.
It's about addressing those root causes and supporting the body's innate ability to heal itself.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by this natural approach. Can you tell us more about what it actually involves?
Well, it's a three-pronged approach that focuses on stimulating the body's natural waste removal systems, changing your diet to support that cleansing process, and incorporating yoga practices to enhance digestion, circulation, and lung function.
So it's a holistic approach that addresses the body as a whole system, not just isolated parts.
I love it. Does it go into detail about specific techniques?
It does. For example, it recommends enemas for cleansing the colon and preventing something it calls auto-intoxication. Now, I know that might sound a bit intense,
Yeah, enemas aren't exactly dinner table conversation.
but I'm curious to hear more about this auto-intoxication concept. What is that?
It's basically the idea that toxins can build up in the colon and get reabsorbed into the bloodstream, contributing to a whole host of health problems. And the material suggests that enemas can help to flush out those toxins and prevent them from causing further harm.
Interesting. It's a different way of thinking about detoxification than what we usually hear. What other techniques does it recommend?
It also talks about abdominal mud packs to ease digestion and promote intestinal movement,
Okay.
and even chest wet packs to help clear congestion and strengthen the lungs.
Okay, those are definitely outside the realm of what most doctors would recommend, but I can see how they might be beneficial, especially if you're looking for a more natural approach.
Right, and it emphasizes the importance of sweating therapies.
Okay.
Things like steam baths, hot foot baths, and even sun baths to stimulate the skin and relieve congestion in the lungs.
So it's not all about intense cleansing techniques. There's some pampering in there too, but what about the diet you mentioned that is a key part of this natural approach?
Yeah.
What does it entail?
It's all about cleansing and rebuilding.
Okay.
The material recommends starting with a fast on lemon juice with honey to give your digestive system a break and help eliminate toxins. Then you transition to a fruit juice diet for further detoxification before gradually reintroducing solid foods.
It sounds like hitting the reset button on your entire system.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about those solid foods. What kinds of things are we talking about here?
The key is balance. It suggests limiting acidic foods,
Okay.
things like processed carbs, fatty meats, and even some proteins,
Oh,
and focusing on alkaline-forming foods, think fresh fruits, leafy green veggies, and things like sprouted graham.
so it's about eating clean and giving your body the best possible fuel. Does it get into specific foods to avoid?
Yes. It specifically mentions things that it believes produce phlegm, like rice, sugar, lentils, curds, and anything that's fried or hard to digest. It's all about reducing inflammation and promoting a healthy internal environment.
It's fascinating how this approach connects food to respiratory health. It's not something you typically hear about in conventional medicine. Does it offer any specific meal ideas?
It does.
Yeah.
For breakfast, it suggests prunes, oranges, berries, or a few black raisins with honey.
Okay.
And for lunch or dinner, a raw veggie salad with things like cucumber, lettuce, tomato, carrot, and beets, along with one or two lightly cooked green vegetables and some wheat bread. Simple but nourishing.
It sounds delicious, actually.
Yeah.
And it's such a different way of thinking about food than what many people are used to. Are there any other dietary guidelines?
It stresses the importance of eating before sunset or at least 2 hours before bed.
Okay.
And it encourages eating less than you think you need, chewing thoroughly, and drinking plenty of water throughout the day.
It's amazing how many little things can make a difference. Anything else we should know about the dietary recommendations?
It specifically cautions against things like spices, chilies, pickles, and excessive tea or coffee. And it even addresses what to do if you lose your appetite during an asthma attack, which apparently is common.
What does it recommend for that?
It suggests fasting until the attack subsides, drinking warm water every 2 hours, and possibly trying an enema.
It sounds pretty intense, but I imagine when you're struggling to breathe, you'd be willing to try anything.
Right. And speaking of trying things, this approach highlights some very specific natural remedies for asthma, and some of them are pretty intriguing.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear about these remedies.
Well, honey is a big one.
Okay.
And get this, it mentions a practice of inhaling air that's been passed over a jug of honey to help ease breathing.
Wait, seriously? Inhaling honey-infused air?
Yeah,
That sounds pretty out there.
it does, but the material explains that honey has a unique mixture of alcohols and oils that release soothing vapors when you do this. It also talks about how honey can thin mucus, help your body get rid of it, and even tone lung tissue, potentially preventing future mucus buildup. They even specify that 1-year-old honey is best for respiratory issues.
You know, I have to admit, as skeptical as I was at first, there's something appealing about the simplicity of it, just honey and air. What other remedies does it suggest?
Well, garlic is another potent remedy, especially for early-stage asthma.
Okay.
The material suggests boiling garlic cloves in milk and drinking that daily. Or as an alternative, you can try steaming ginger tea with minced garlic and drinking that morning and evening.
Those both sound potent. But I can see how garlic, with its antimicrobial properties, might be helpful. Anything a little less pungent.
Turmeric is another powerful tool, especially for bronchial asthma.
Okay.
The material recommends taking a teaspoon of turmeric powder with a glass of milk 2 or 3 times a day, ideally on an empty stomach.
Turmeric seems to be good for everything these days.
Oh, I know, right?
I've heard so much about its anti-inflammatory properties. Are there any other home remedies mentioned?
There are a few more. It suggests massaging the chest with mustard oil and camphor during an attack to help loosen phlegm, and it recommends inhaling steam from boiling water with caraway seeds, also known as ajwain, to open up the airways.
It's incredible how much wisdom there is in these traditional healing methods. But it sounds like this approach isn't just about specific remedies. It emphasizes a more holistic lifestyle change as well, right?
Absolutely. It talks about the importance of connecting with natural elements like fresh air, sunlight, and water.
Okay.
It advocates for incorporating regular fasting, occasional enemas, breathing exercises, seeking out a dry climate if possible, engaging in light exercise, and even maintaining proper posture.
It really is about treating the whole person, not just the symptoms. Does it go into any detail about specific yoga practices? You mentioned those earlier.
It does. It mentions Gelneti, which is a nasal cleansing technique using salt water, and Vamanduti, a cleansing technique for the stomach. It also lists a number of asanas or yoga postures that are thought to be beneficial for asthma.
Do you think you could break down some of those yoga practices for us? I'm imagining most of our listeners aren't familiar with those terms.
Of course, for example, it mentions Ekpaduttanasana, which is a standing forward bend,
Okay.
Yoga Mudra, a seated pose with a forward bend, and Sarangasana, or shoulder stand. It also mentions poses like Bhujangasana, or cobra pose, and Tanurasana, or bow pose, both of which involve back bends.
I'm starting to get a sense of how these poses might help with breathing and opening up the chest. Does it mention any breathing exercises specifically?
It does. It talks about pranayamas, which are specific breathing techniques like Kapalbhati,
Right.
known for its energizing and cleansing effects, and Anuloma Viloma,
Okay.
also known as alternate nostril breathing,
Oh, yeah.
which is believed to balance the nervous system.
Okay, that's starting to make more sense. So even if you don't know the names of all the poses, the takeaway is that yoga and breathing exercises can be incredibly powerful tools for managing asthma. Any final words of wisdom from this material before we move on?
It cautions asthmatics to be mindful of their triggers,
Okay.
whether it's dusty environments, cold temperatures, food sensitivities, or even mental stress. But it ends on a very positive note, emphasizing that with the right lifestyle adjustments, asthmatics can absolutely lead full and vibrant lives.
That's a powerful message and a hopeful one. It sounds like this natural approach to asthma is all about taking a step back, listening to your body, and making choices that support your overall well-being. But before we dive deeper into how to actually implement these ideas,
Right.
let's pause for a moment to let all this information sink in. We'll be back in a flash to explore some practical ways you can start incorporating these natural remedies and lifestyle changes into your own life.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Nature Cares podcast. Before the break, we were talking about some pretty fascinating insights into managing asthma naturally. It's a perspective that really encourages us to think differently about this condition.
I know we covered so much ground,
We did.
from the ancient roots of the word asthma to those really specific dietary recommendations and home remedies.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those suggestions, like the enemas and mud packs, were pretty intense.
I agree. They're definitely not your typical medical advice.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember that this approach is all about addressing the root causes of asthma and restoring balance to the body. It's not just about masking symptoms.
Right. It's about empowering people to take control of their own health and explore options beyond conventional medicine. And while some of the suggestions might seem a bit extreme, there are also plenty of simple things you can start doing today to incorporate this natural approach into your life.
Exactly. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight.
Right.
Start with small, manageable changes. For example, think about how you can bring more honey into your diet.
And remember that practice we discussed where you inhale air that's been passed over a jug of honey?
Yeah.
That could be an interesting experiment. Or you could simply add honey to your tea, drizzle it on toast, or even enjoy a spoonful straight up.
I love that it's so simple, yet it could have such profound effects. What about some of those other remedies we talked about, like garlic and turmeric? Are those safe for everyone to try?
That's a great question, and it's always a good idea to check with your doctor before starting any new remedies,
All right.
especially if you're taking medication or have any underlying health conditions. But in general, garlic and turmeric are considered safe for most people. You can easily add garlic to your cooking, or try taking turmeric supplements.
I've heard so many good things about turmeric lately.
Oh, me too.
People are adding it to smoothies, lattes, even soups. It's amazing how versatile it is.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that are good for you, what about those yoga practices we touched on? I have to admit, I'm a bit intimidated by yoga. I'm not exactly the most flexible person.
You don't have to be a yoga master to reap the benefits.
Okay. There are plenty of beginner-friendly yoga classes and resources available both online and in most communities.
Okay.
And even incorporating some simple breathing exercises into your day can make a big difference.
Okay, that sounds a bit more manageable. Can you give us an example of a simple breathing exercise that anyone can try?
Absolutely. One that's really easy is called diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing.
Okay.
You simply sit or lie down comfortably, place one hand on your chest and the other on your belly, and then inhale deeply through your nose, letting your belly expand, then exhale slowly through your mouth, allowing your belly to fall.
That sounds so relaxing. I can see how that would help to calm the nervous system and ease tension in the body, which could be really helpful during an asthma attack.
Exactly. And remember those specific breathing techniques or pranayamas that we mentioned earlier? There's one called Kapalbhati that's known for its energizing and cleansing effects,
Yeah,
and another called Anuloma Viloma,
right.
which is alternate nostril breathing believed to balance the nervous system and promote a sense of calm.
I've actually tried alternate nostril breathing before, and I was surprised at how effective it was at calming my mind.
Really?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to start incorporating that in my daily routine.
Good.
But I have to ask about those more intense practices we discussed earlier, like the enemas and mud packs.
Yeah.
Are those really necessary for everyone?
They can be helpful for some people, particularly those who are dealing with a lot of digestive issues or feel like they need a deeper cleanse.
Okay.
But they're certainly not essential for everyone. And honestly, most people can see amazing results just by focusing on those simpler lifestyle changes we talked about, cleaning up their diet,
Right.
incorporating honey and other natural remedies, and practicing yoga and breathing exercises.
It's about finding what works for you and your body.
Right.
It's a personal journey.
Absolutely. And speaking of diet, I know those recommendations we discussed might seem a bit restrictive at first,
Yes.
like avoiding all those phlegm-producing foods. I imagine some people might be wondering how they can stick to such a specific way of eating.
Right. It's definitely a shift from the standard American diet.
Yeah.
But I think the key is to remember that it's all about balance.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to give up all your favorite foods forever.
Exactly. Start by experimenting with cutting back on certain foods for a while and see how your body responds. Maybe eliminate one or two things at a time, like sugar or dairy, and see if you notice any improvement in your symptoms.
The process of listening to your body and finding what feels best for you. And remember, focus on adding in those nutrient-rich alkaline foods that this approach emphasizes, things like fresh fruits, vegetables, and sprouted gram, nourishing your body with real whole foods can make a world of difference.
I completely agree. It's about shifting your mindset from deprivation to abundance. Instead of focusing on what you can't have, focus on all the delicious, healthy foods that you can enjoy.
I love that it's a much more positive and empowering way to approach food.
Yeah.
But I have to ask about those triggers we discussed earlier, things like death, cold temperatures, and even stress.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pretty hard to avoid in everyday life, right?
You're right. You can't control everything in your environment,
Right.
but you can certainly take steps to minimize your exposure to things that trigger your asthma. For example, using an air purifier in your home. Washing your bedding frequently in hot water and vacuuming regularly can help reduce dust and other allergens.
Those are great practical tips. And what about stress? That's a big one for so many people. And it's not always easy to just eliminate.
It isn't. Stress is a part of life.
Right.
But there are definitely things you can do to manage your stress levels. Things like practicing yoga meditation, spending time in nature, or engaging in activities that bring you joy.
Those are all great suggestions. And I think it highlights the fact that this natural approach to asthma is really a holistic approach to life. It's about taking care of your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. It's about recognizing that everything is connected.
I couldn't agree more. And the more you can incorporate these natural remedies and lifestyle changes into your daily routine, the better equipped you'll be to manage your asthma and live a full, vibrant life.
It's an ongoing journey of self-discovery and empowerment. It's about finding what works for you and making choices that support your overall health and happiness. And on that note, we're going to take a short pause to gather our thoughts and prepare for the final part of our deep dive. We'll be back shortly to answer some questions from our listeners and offer our insights and advice. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Nature Cures podcast. As we've been exploring this natural approach to asthma, It's been really eye-opening to see how many options there are beyond conventional medicine.
It really is.
It's empowering.
Yeah, it's all about taking ownership of your health.
And we've received so many insightful questions from our listeners,
Yeah.
all eager to learn more about incorporating these natural remedies and lifestyle changes into their own lives.
Yeah,
Are you ready to dive into some of those questions?
absolutely. I'm ready.
All right, here's one that came up quite a bit. A lot of listeners want to know more about those specific yoga practices you mentioned. They're wondering if some poses are better than others for managing asthma.
That's a great question, and while I'm not a yoga instructor,
Right.
the material we've been looking at does mention a number of poses thought to be particularly beneficial for asthma.
Okay.
Things like Ekabuduttanasana, which is a standing forward bend yoga mudra, a seated pose with a forward bend Sarwangasana, the shoulder stand.
Those names are still a mouthful for me,
Yeah.
but I'm starting to understand how these poses might help. Is it about opening up the chest and improving lung capacity?
Exactly, and don't forget about back bends,
Oh,
like Bhujangasana or Cobra pose and Dhanurasana, the bow pose.
okay.
These can also help to expand the chest and improve breathing.
It sounds like it's not necessarily about finding the perfect pose, but
Yeah.
rather about exploring different options and finding a practice that feels good for your body and that you can stick with.
You got it. And if you're new to yoga, there are tons of beginner-friendly resources out there, both online and in local studios. Don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you.
All right, here's another question that popped up a lot, and this one is about diet. A listener writes, I'm really interested in this idea of eating more alkaline foods, but I'm not sure where to start. What are some good examples of alkaline foods that I can easily add to my meals?
That's a fantastic question. And the good news is that there are so many delicious alkaline foods to choose from. Leafy green vegetables are a great place to start things. Spinach, kale, collard greens.
I love those. You can throw them in salads, smoothies,
Mhm.
soups. They're so versatile. What else?
Cruciferous veggies like broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts are also excellent choices. And don't forget about root vegetables, things like beets, sweet potatoes, and carrots.
Those are all so good for you, and they add so much flavor and color to your meals.
Hmm.
What about fruits? Are any fruits particularly alkaline?
Most fruits are alkaline forming,
Oh, that's good.
which is great news because they're so delicious and easy to incorporate into your diet.
Right.
Berries, melons, citrus fruits, they're all good options.
So basically, if it's a whole unprocessed food, it's probably a safe bet when it comes to an alkaline diet, right? Yeah.
Pretty much the material also mentions sprouted gram as a good alkaline food. Have you ever tried those?
I have. They're delicious in salads and wraps, and they're packed with protein and nutrients. So really, this whole approach to diet is about focusing on those real whole foods that our bodies are designed to thrive on.
Exactly. Okay, here's another question we received several times, and it's about those more intense cleansing practices, enemas.
Right.
Some listeners are curious about how often they should be doing them.
That's a good question. And honestly, it's one that's best answered by a qualified healthcare professional.
Mm-hmm.
The material does mention enemas as a way to cleanse the colon, but it doesn't get into specifics about frequency.
Right, and it's important to remember that there are many other gentler ways to support detoxification,
Right.
like drinking plenty of water, eating a fiber-rich diet, and sweating through exercise.
So it's about finding what feels right for your body and consulting with a trusted healthcare professional to get personalized advice. Okay, we have time for one more question. This one is from a listener who writes, I've tried so many different things to manage my asthma, but nothing seems to work. I'm starting to feel hopeless. What advice do you have for someone who feels like they've tried everything?
That's a tough situation to be in, and I can only imagine how frustrating it must feel.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I think it's important to remember that everyone is different. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
It's a journey, and it can take time to find what truly helps you manage your asthma.
It's about being patient with yourself and not giving up hope.
Exactly. And sometimes it's helpful to seek out support from a healthcare professional who understands and embraces a holistic approach to health. A naturopath, for example, might be able to offer valuable insights and guidance.
And remember, even small changes can make a big difference over time. Just because you haven't found the perfect solution yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep believing in your body's ability to heal.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. This natural approach to asthma is really about so much more than just treating a condition.
Right.
It's about embracing a way of life that supports your overall well-being, mind, body, and spirit.
I love that.
It's about connecting with the healing power of nature and trusting in your body's innate wisdom.
It's a beautiful and empowering message.
Right.
And remember, even if you just take away one small thing from this deep dive, one tiny change you can make in your life, you're already on the path to better health and well-being. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time on the Nature Cures podcast.